Hello, podheads, and welcome back to another episode of Over My Dead Pod. I'm your host, Holly Spear.
And I'm Kylie Colwell.
We're just going to jump right in because I have a doozy of a case for you guys today. In a town like Lakeville, Indiana, you don't get privacy, at least not the kind people get in a city. Everyone knows what time you go to work. Everyone knows what church you go to. Everyone knows if your car is home. And if you don't show up somewhere that you always show up, people notice fast. But that's how the town discovered that their town pastor, his wife, and their two daughters were brutally murdered in their home. Some people think they know what happened in this case, but this case, like every good true crime story, has a twist and a couple question marks. So buckle up, podheads. This is the story of the Pelley family murders. From the outside, the story reads like a small town blueprint: a pastor, his wife, and a house full of kids, and a church community that functioned like an extended family. The church was Olive Branch in Lakeville, Indiana, and it's April 1989. And the Pelley house wasn't down the street or across town. This was like a parsonage. Is that how you say that?
Sounds right to me.
If I didn't say that right, the definition of it is it's basically like the pastor's home and he's like right next to the church. So it's like also the church's house, and the pastor that preaches at that church, he lives in that house. It's close enough between like church life and home life. That line like doesn't really exist. So Pastor Bob Pelley lives there with his wife Dawn and their blended family. So it's a real busy, loud, blended family home. Kids coming and going, school stuff, church stuff, constant motion. And the house was always unlocked. Kids were wandering in and out, church members popped by, the door was always open, and people were always welcome to come and go as they pleased. This is why the Pelley family felt familiar to everyone. Bob Pelley was the pastor, a man who was described as steady, committed, and deeply involved in his church life. Then there was Dawn Pelley, his wife. She was described to be a good mother. She was protective and devoted to her children, and by all accounts, deeply invested in keeping her family together, living inside this like blended household that she was trying to create. Between them, there are five kids. There are Bob's two, which was Jeff, who's 17, and Jackie, she's a teenager. And then the wife had kids from a prior marriage, and they are Jessica, who's about 9 or 10, and two girls, Janelle and Jolene, and they're 8 and 6. Bob and Dawn had both lost their previous spouses, but somehow had found each other, and they were working through this blended family situation that they now faced. They had a full table, a full house. It is April 29th, 1989, and this happens to be prom weekend. So kids are doing what the kids are doing. They're doing the hair, the dresses, the photos, the dinner plans, corsages, all the things. This is like a very busy weekend in this small town. So it didn't seem out of the question that the pastor and his family were late for church that next Sunday. So the next Sunday would be April 30th. People arrive at the Olive Branch Church for service, and immediately something feels wrong. Pastor Bob hadn't shown. As you could probably guess, small town, small community, this is a small church. So this isn't like Bob's just late. This is like Bob's got the keys to the church kind of situation. Like nobody's getting in until Bob gets in. They kind of wait around. The congregation just kind of waits a little bit until they decide they're going to go check. So they walk right over across the street and they go to his house. And immediately something was completely out of the ordinary because the door is locked and the curtains are drawn. They knock on the door, but no one answers. And that alone is strange. All the cars are there, so they should be inside. But after repeated knocking and calling out names, they get nothing. No voice, no footsteps, no movements behind that door. Someone ends up finding a spare key. They unlock the front door and they step inside. And in the hallway, just a few feet from the door, they see Pastor Bob Pelley lying in a pool of blood on the floor. Downstairs in the basement, they find Dawn with her two little girls, Janelle and Jolene. They've all three been shot. Four people dead inside a home that sits right next to a church full of people who had no idea anything was happening. Police began to swarm the scene. At first glance, detectives were able to tell that this was a murder scene, as opposed to like a murder-suicide situation. And they knew that because there was no murder weapon found around any of the bodies. Therefore, we would know that, like, for example, if the father had killed his family and then killed himself, we would see some kind of weapon that he used to then, you know, kill himself. So that was out of the question. They knew immediately that this was some kind of murder. Detectives could tell that all victims had died by a shotgun, and they also couldn't find anything of value taken from the home. So this is going to rule out a robbery gone wrong from the get-go. There's also no forced entry, which we know suggests that victims either knew the murderer or the family let the murderer in, or the murderer somehow knew how to get inside.
We have so many cases where, like, oh, they ruled out robbery gone wrong. How many times is it actually a robbery gone wrong? Because it doesn't seem like that ever happens.
I feel like we say that with every single case that we do. Maybe we don't like picking cases like that where that happens, but yeah, I don't know the statistics on that one, but
We'll have to look into that.
yeah. As police investigate the scene, it becomes immediately obvious that something is missing and terror sets in because it isn't just four bodies, it's also missing children: Jeff, Jackie, and Jessica. A short time later, Jessica actually shows up to the house. She has been at a sleepover and she unfortunately returns home to police cars, crime scene tape, and detectives swarming her home. And she learns in the most brutal way possible that her mother, her sisters, and her stepfather are gone. Jessica becomes the first living piece of this puzzle. And in all the chaos, she's able to tell detectives where they can find the other two missing children. Jackie is actually away at a church-related event at a nearby college, and Jeff is actually out of state at the moment with a group of friends. Jeff had already graduated the year before, but his girlfriend was in high school, and it was her prom night. So he was involved in like all the prom festivities that weekend. So after prom, a group of students went out of state to a trip to Six Flags, the amusement park, if you don't know. So Jeff will be with all of those kids. Police are now left with the horrible duty to locate the other two kids and bring them home so they can break the news to them that their family is gone. In the meantime, crime scene investigators process the crime while detectives work on bringing the other children home. And here's what we learned from the scene. First, people close to the family knew that Bob kept a shotgun in his bedroom, a shotgun which was absent from the scene. One, weird that it's gone, but two, weird that a killer would come into a home and force his way inside and then not bring a weapon with him.
Did you say, or did they know that there was forced entry?
They found no evidence of forced entry. I guess I meant like forced entry as in like pushed his way inside or, knew how to open a window or had a key to the home.
Yeah, so someone most likely who wasn't planning on murdering them when they showed up.
Exactly. Yeah. Police believe that the gun used to kill the family was actually Bob's own gun. We also know that the killer took the gun with him and then picked up every single shell casing so that the weapon could not be traced back as easily. The position of Bob's body is important. His body position tells a story. Bob was found in a narrow hallway. His feet were aimed down the hall, pointing towards two bedrooms at the back of the house. Therefore, he was shot when he was standing at the end of the hallway facing the shooter, who either came out of the parents' bedroom or Jeff's bedroom. Bob was an ambush from someone who had walked through the front door. He was surprised by someone in one of the back bedrooms. Bob was shot in the chest. He was knocked backwards, and the second shot struck him beneath the chin. The shooter had to have stood close to Bob when he shot him, and he was already inside the home when he ambushed Bob. After Bob went down, the shooter did not flee. They then stepped over Bob's body and headed down the basement where Dawn and the girls were. They would have heard the shot and knew that someone was upstairs. They hear the shooter walk down the basement stairs, and he then fires 3 shots, one to each of the heads of the victims. Investigators said the basement was covered in blood, bone fragments, brain tissue, everything. The killer would have been completely covered in blood. Of course, the detectives find evidence that the killer stripped their clothes and put them in the family's washing machine. Police move fast to bring Jeff back to Indiana. Of course, they want to talk to him as quickly as possible because he may have noticed something strange before he left, something that could lead to the family's killer. But Jeff told the detectives the day he left was largely uneventful. It was the 29th and it was completely normal. He went to work. He works at McDonald's, by the way, and his dad picked him up from work that day because Jeff was actually grounded from his car. He had lunch at home. He ends up washing his car because he's planning on driving it to prom that night. He has some friends over later that day to take pictures for prom, and then he left home to go get his date. Like on the way to go get his date, his car starts like acting strange. We don't really know what that means or how long he pulls over, but he ends up pulling over, kind of tinkering with his car a little bit, and he calls his girlfriend from the gas station to let her know that he's going to be a few minutes late because of his car. But not long after, he ends up picking her up. They meet up with their friends, and he and his girlfriend had been with those friends until police track him down. Jeff's girlfriend would say that Jeff was completely normal at prom. Nothing was out of the ordinary. But shortly before police show up to tell Jeff of this terrible news, his girlfriend said that he did kind of start acting off. Like maybe he had some kind of like sixth sense that something was wrong at home. He had told his girlfriend that he just had a feeling something was wrong. Something bad had happened, but he could not describe what.
Eerie.
It's a little eerie. I don't know what to say about that other than it's a bit strange. So, first of all, Jeff was supposed to be grounded from his car this weekend, but apparently his dad had told Jeff that he could go ahead and go to prom, but he would only go to prom if he could drive him there. So, Jeff was supposed to be grounded from his car, like under any circumstances, including prom. And Jeff's friends knew this. So, they were probably pretty surprised when Jeff's dad had given in and let Jeff go ahead and use his car for the weekend. When police asked Jeff about this, Jeff said, well, yeah, his father had just had a change of heart. He also said he had no idea who would want to hurt anyone in his family. As I'm sure you might have guessed by now, Jeff might be police's number one suspect already. And that's pretty obvious. We know that inside the home, it suggests that the killer was comfortable there. The killer moved through the home like they belonged there. They had time to go upstairs to the basement, time to remove the evidence, lock up, and time to leave.
He would know about the shotgun and he's mad about the car. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, he's number one from the get-go. When the investigators start building their timeline, they land on the most controversial part of this case, and that is the timeline itself. So we'll go over it. At 4:30 p.m., a group of teenagers stopped by the Pelley home before prom to take pictures. And Jeff was there and he was still getting ready. He hadn't put his tux on yet, but we know that everything's normal at 4:30. The family is home at that time. 10 to 15 minutes later, Matt, one of the friends that was there taking pictures, comes back to the Pelley house because he forgot his corsage there. He goes in, gets his corsage. By 5:15, Matt drives past the Pelley home again on his way to meet the others, and he reported that Jeff's car was still parked there. By 5:17 p.m., just a few minutes later, from 5:15 to 5:17, just a few minutes, Jeff was confirmed to be at a nearby gas station, and phone records show that he made a call from that location telling his date that he was running late because of car trouble. So it checks out. By 6 o'clock p.m., another prom attendee went to the Pelley home for photos, but found that the house was locked, the curtains were closed, and no one was inside. Investigators believe that the murders had already taken place by this time, by 6 o'clock p.m. According to the police's timeline and based on witness statements and verified phone records, they conclude that the crimes could have taken place within a window of approximately 20 minutes between 4:50 and 5:10 p.m. Bob was shot upstairs, followed by Dawn, Jolene, and Janelle in the basement, and investigators allege that the shooter then gathered the shell casings, placed clothing in the laundry, showered, changed clothes, locked the house, took the weapon, gathered evidence, found somewhere to ditch the gun, and then left the home and went to prom. And this was Jeff Pelley. Jeff then arrives at prom that night with his white tuxedo, and photographs from the event show him posing with friends, appearing relaxed and smiling. So, for reference, this is police's theory, and it would be a pretty tight window. Jeff would have had to do all of this in less than 20 minutes, and this becomes one of the most debated issues in this case. But this is not the only issue in this case. Another huge issue is that police very early on had a deadlock in their minds that Jeff was their killer. So they went on to collect 0 fingerprints from the scene, and they did not assess or document like what state of rigor mortis the bodies were in. Therefore, you would not know exactly what time they had been murdered.
So where did they get this timeline from?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they know the timeline of what happened that day just based off of like witness statements and like phone records. But so that's verified of the timeline of what happened that day. But the timeline of the murder, it's like TBD. They're like, okay, there's a 20-minute window here that they could have been killed on this day. They don't know that because they haven't taken any evidence. And also, they didn't take any fingerprints because they just assumed that Jeff did it. So his fingerprints are all already all over the house, but we don't know if there's any stranger fingerprints in there.
If the one kid that came back and the house was locked up, no answer at the door, maybe the family just stepped out for a minute, went out to dinner, blah, blah, blah. Maybe they were killed in the middle of the night. That would change everything.
Everything. Yeah, exactly. It makes it, as you can assume, extremely difficult for detectives to pinpoint the time of the murder and determine if this tight timeline would even give Jeff enough time to commit the murder in the first place. It seems like investigators themselves were skeptical if it was even possible for Jeff to commit the murders in such a short amount of time. Plus, even if they wanted to arrest Jeff on suspicion of his parents' murders, there is no way that they can do that because they have no concrete evidence that he's done anything wrong yet. Jeff and his siblings continue to live as much of a normal life as they could after this. The surviving siblings, Jeff, Jackie, and Jessica, all end up moving in with different relatives and moving different places of the country. Jeff ends up working for some family friends. He tries to go back to college and eventually moves to Fort Myers, Florida. And the case seems to go cold or pretty lukewarm from here. For some of the investigators, they know that he is their suspect. They just can't prove it. Those same investigators are happy to hear that in 1994, Jeff was arrested, but not for anything to do with his family's death. Well, kind of, but not really. Jeff is arrested on wire fraud. And this charge comes from a scheme that Jeff concocted to get to his family's inheritance. So the deal is, after the death of his parents, the surviving Pelley siblings were given an inheritance which was to be distributed by their grandfather, Bob's father. I'm unsure if the siblings got a certain amount each month or it was just inheritance they had to rely on, but for some reason, the grandfather was in charge of distributing the money. But Jeff was not playing by those rules, and he made up this like incredibly elaborate scheme where he told his grandfather that he had outstanding bills of like $20,000 and he needed to pay. He gave his grandfather like fake bills, even like fake numbers of people to call. And Jeff's grandfather obviously felt something was off about this entire ordeal, and he ended up figuring out that everything was fraudulent. So Jeff was arrested and charged and convicted of wire fraud. And no, wire fraud doesn't make you guilty of murder, obviously, but it did show the police that Jeff was pretty much willing to do anything to get what he wanted, including lie to his own family. But still, we have nothing to charge Jeff on, and Jeff goes on to live a pretty normal life. Actually, like a pretty good life. He ends up moving to LA where he gets a good job and he lives pretty comfortably. But in 2002, police would stop Jeff on his way back from Australia and arrest him for the murder of his family. And Jeff is charged with 4 counts of murder, but Jeff is not tried for this murder until 2006. So Jeff ends up like challenging this delay, filing motions, arguing his constitutional rights were violated and that the state failed to bring him to trial within the required time frame. And I really don't know why he wasn't brought to trial sooner. I really actually have no idea, but his motions ended up being denied. And in 2006, Jeff Pelley continues on to trial. Let's talk about the trial a little bit. The prosecution argued that Jeff's motivation was anger over restrictions that his father had placed on him before prom, so grounding him from his car. So this frustrated Jeff and caused an argument that led to the shooting of his father. Then Jeff was forced to eliminate the family members in the home that witnessed him shoot his father. He needed to do all of this to attend prom and get his way. I mean, I guess if you're like a teenager and prom is like the biggest deal to you, this is motive. But of course, you have some people questioning, like, is this really motive to kill your family, or is this just like a catalyst that led to an argument and you already have issues and you end up killing your family? It's debated.
I don't know, because like we did the Erin Caffey case, another teen girl who had her whole family murdered just because they didn't want her to be dating.
Yeah. And you also have like those cases where, and we might have done a couple of them now where kids like pretend they're going to college and then their parents are about to find out that they've just been, blowing money and doing whatever for 2 years. And then they feel like there's no other option but to kill their family, which is Just like such a strange concept, obviously. But yeah, I don't know if it's like a not no frontal lobe development, rational thinking skills kind of situation. But anyways, I guess all that to say, I guess we've seen people kill for less, but seems insane. Witnesses testify that Bob stood firm that Jeff would not be driving his car to prom. And apparently, Jeff said at a party something along the lines of threatening to do to his friends what he did to his family. So you kind of have this like hearsay, he said, she said kind of evidence being brought up by the prosecution at trial.
I could definitely see teenagers after the fact learning about the murders being like, oh, Jeff said this like weird thing.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like would easily happen. Yeah. Again, the prosecutor's case is based on the very, very narrow window of about 20 minutes that they argue it was possible for Jeff to murder his family on the afternoon of April 29th. They placed Jeff at the house during that time, and based on witness sightings and the fact that his phone records show he was at the gas station, he would have had these 20 minutes that they say he killed his parents and siblings. Investigators testified about items found that they argue supported the theory of Jeff trying to conceal evidence, including clothes from the washing machine at the Pelley home that appeared washed despite being the only items there at the time. But the prosecution had no physical evidence directly tying Jeff to the murder scene, no weapon, no fingerprints, no eyewitnesses. The case was built on a timeline which was already slim, and Jeff's notice and his behavior before and after the murders. Apparently, when investigators had told Jeff that his family was dead, he didn't show the correct emotions that they believed that he should. He didn't seem to cry or to even be upset. Jeff's defense lawyers contested the prosecution's timeline, arguing that it was implausible that Jeff could commit these murders, clean up, and still arrive at prom seeming normal, taking pictures and doing all the normal prom things that evening. They focused on the lack of direct forensic evidence and questioned assumptions about the sightings and timing. The defense raised issues about claims concerning clothes allegedly washed after the murders, suggesting that crime scene records did not clearly support that assertion.
If this was like heat of passion, I'm mad at you for not letting me drive the car. I'm a teenager. Like, would he even have like the wherewithal to like clean up the crime scene?
And clean it up that fast.
And well,
Yeah. Defense attorneys also criticized investigators' work and questioned why other leads weren't followed. If you remember, the police didn't take fingerprints at the scene because they were already focused on Jeff and thought there was no reason to test for fingerprints because Jeff's would have been there anyway. So there's that. The defense highlighted the absence of any confession, any eyewitnesses, or physical links, such as the missing shotgun shells, the gun, or anything tying Jeff to the case. After a 10-day jury trial beginning July 11th, 2006, a jury found Jeff Pelley guilty on all 4 counts of murder. Jeff avoided the death penalty because he was under the age of 18 at the time of the crimes. But he was sentenced to 160 years in prison, effectively a life sentence. There is a school of thought that many subscribe to, and more than you might think that Jeff Pelley is innocent. So let me tell you why and rebuckle your seatbelt, because what if I was to tell you that along with no real circumstantial evidence against Jeff, Bob actually had been telling people that someone was coming to kill him and his family? Dun,
oh,
dun, dun. We have the fact that the state's case is entirely circumstantial. The prosecution didn't have a murder weapon, and Jeff had maintained his innocence the entire time. There's not one piece of physical evidence that directly proved Jeff fired the shots. At trial, the state argued that investigators found a partial set of clothes in the washer and used that to suggest that Jeff had tried to clean away the evidence. But it's also argued that there were coins and like a readable receipt in these jeans. There's people that say there's no way that he washed these clothes after the murder and there's still like a receipt in his pants that's readable. Like maybe it's just laundry waiting to be done in the home that Jeff lived.
and his laundry would be there.
Right. It didn't have blood on it. The prosecution is saying, well, yeah, he cleaned it in the washing machine. And the defense is saying, no, it was never cleaned in the first place because there's stuff in his pockets that would have been ruined in the washing machine.
Also, we see all the time people clean up and like to the naked eye, you can't see blood, but even after cleaning and bleach and stuff, there's still with luminol, you can see blood. There would be
Right.
blood in the washing machine.
Yeah. Another thing that we've already hashed is the 20-minute window, and some claim that it's physically and behaviorally implausible that Jeff could have done this. There's also a theory that there has been two shooters in the house, and this would fit the timeline. They could do it in 20 minutes if there was two people that were shooting. So there's some people that think that. Next, Bob Pelley may not have been a squeaky clean pastor like the town of Lakeland believed. So, ABC 57 reported that Jeff claimed his attorneys were ineffective for not looking into possible connections that his father had with organized crime in their old town. And a local saleswoman reportedly told investigators that in the days before the Pelley family was killed, Bob made statements that he feared the mob would murder his family and that he worked for the mob in the past.
Odd.
Yes. According to this account, the record of that 2023 interview was made by investigators, and it was never provided to Jeff Pelley's defense during trial. And that witness who said that therefore never testified. So we have this woman who's making these statements that were recorded by investigators that said that Bob Pelley was worried about the mob or some organized crime unit killing his family before its death. The police allegedly have this interview and they did not turn it over to Jeff Pelley for his defense.
That's a no-no.
Yeah. Supporters believe that law enforcement may have ignored or suppressed alternative suspects or theories involving organized crime. Also, interestingly enough, private investigators and lawyers for Jeff Pelley have pointed to connections between Bob and a Fort Myers, Florida bank where he used to work in 1980 that would suggest this theory. A private investigator named Tom testified in a hearing that he was investigating the murder of a man named Eric Dawson. And Eric Dawson had financial ties to the same bank where Bob worked. So, this private investigator argued that there were overlaps between people connected to the Dawson case and Bob Pelley's activities at this bank, and that Pelley may have been involved or aware of serious wrongdoing. The investigator tied Bob's Florida bank employment to suspicious financial figures. This investigator also reported that someone had told him, Bob claimed, prior to the Pelley murders, that he had moved money for very, very bad people who were going to kill him and his family. So this was presented at Jeff's appeal hearing, and detectives present expressed skepticism, questioning why this story surfaced in 2003, 14 years after the murders. Here's the thing. There are all these theories and claims floating around by people and private investigators that the Pelleys have hired, but they've never been proven. But my main issue is that there's really just not a lot to convict Jeff Pelley in the first place. There's no direct evidence. And then police don't even test for the things that they should be testing for to convict Jeff Pelley. Then you start to float around these theories that seem crazy, but all of a sudden seem a little bit probable because you haven't proved that the murderer, in my opinion, haven't proved that the person you think is the murderer actually did it. So, yeah, these theories seem crazy, but it seems crazy to convict someone on no real physical evidence.
You can't cross anyone off the list, in my opinion.
Yeah. Jeff Pelley has continued to pursue legal challenges to his conviction. His team sought post-conviction relief and multiple retrials, arguing errors in evidence and investigative shortcomings. These motions include requests for a new trial and evidentiary hearings, which have been denied. Judges have found that Jeff has not shown that the original verdict was unreliable or that the outcome would have changed with different evidence, which is what he would have to prove to get a new trial. As recently as 2004 and 2005, courts have reaffirmed the denial of a new trial, leaving Jeff Pelley's conviction in place for the murder of half of his family. And that is the case of the Pelley family murder.
Yeah, I'm not convinced.
Yeah, I'm not either. I mean, I think it's obviously possible. Personally, you're going to have to give me a little bit more than that.
Did not meet the beyond a reasonable doubt threshold for me.
No, not even close. If it wasn't Jeff, then it's very, very eerie to think that someone came into this church family's home, basically annihilated the whole family that was in the house at the time, and then just disappeared. without a trace. I mean, it's eerie if Jeff did it too, but almost more so if it's a stranger.
My thing is, if it were Jeff and he had it in him, I feel like he'd have a bit more of a criminal history or like a history of violence after the fact. Just kill your family and then, I mean, yeah, he had like the wire fraud charge, but then you don't go on to be an asshole.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you would think somebody with that amount of rage who does that kind of stuff. I mean, you see people that kill people kind of progress in that keep going that way. And for him to never have any other kind of offenses like that in the time that he was living out of prison is strange. So,
Yeah, I need some more physical evidence,
yeah.
please. I'm curious what the listeners will think.
Yeah, let us know what you think. Is that enough evidence for you to convict somebody? Well, anyway, should we jump into overtime?
Let's do it.
Okay, so my overtime is I am negative one tooth in my head.
Holly lost a tooth in a very
I
traumatic fashion, texted us the story, and as I was reading the story, I got goosebumps. So I told her she has to tell everyone in overtime.
Well, we'll start since Kate's not here to defend herself. We'll start with the fact that I texted the girls and I'm like, please distract me. I'm at the dentist and I'm scared. Kate says, don't be a little bitch. And I was like, yeah, you're right. At that time, I also did not know that I was going to get my tooth extracted. But I came in there for a crack. Well, a pretty good break in my tooth. And I guess it had been cracked for a while. So it had been getting nasty. And I didn't know that. I mean, maybe I might have known that. I've been scared. I'm scared of the dentist, y'all. I'm scared. I do a lot to not go to the dentist or go get medical things done, obviously. But anyways, they had to jerk that thing right out that second. And well, actually, I sat on the gas for a while and they were like, "Ugh, are you feeling it yet?" And of course, I'm like, nope. And then they're like, you feeling it yet? And I'm like, nope, still not feeling it. Like, fly me to the moon. And
Yeah, give me the ketamine, get me the morphine,
yeah,
get me the fentanyl.
yeah, I'm like, I need some more. But anyways, I wasn't nearly where I should have been. And then they start yanking my tooth out. I mean, I'm telling you, like the dentist, his hand was like shaking, like because he was pulling so hard and like my head was being jerked around. I've never experienced anything like that. Honestly, the whole time I was sitting there, like, I cannot believe that we do this in the society that we live in today. We just do this. It's very strange.
Yeah, is this like up to board?
I I would like to know. I mean, the dentist, like, I think he was a good dentist. I actually do. I think, but I'm like, if you don't mandate dentists to put people to sleep
Yeah, you
to
shouldn't
do
be
this,
up on all fours above me on the table yanking my tooth out
yeah,
with your bare hands.
girl. And let me tell you, when that cracked, it. I mean, it was you could hear it down the hall, like when it came out, when it cracked, and it didn't come out in one piece either. And then the commentary that I was getting from him, like he was like, "Ah, I can't find anywhere to hold on to it." He's like, "I can't find anywhere to get a good grip on it." And I'm like, "Oh, oh my gosh, you're gonna make me queasy just like saying the words that you're saying."
Like, what do you want me to do?
Yeah, I'm like, just get it out, get it out. I was about to, it's once you're that far deep, like you can't stop either. Like I wish I would have stopped a long time ago and been like, all right, I'm gonna go. I need to go to the, I need to go to the emergency room. I can't do this. You're gonna have to put me out. So I'm negative one tooth. I get my implant in a couple months. I had to have like a bone graft. I'm sure that this is not that big of a deal to a lot of people, but to me, it was a big deal. I was scared. I was scared.
It's
So,
traumatic.
anyways, yeah, it was dramatic, but I'm negative one tooth. Take care of your teeth because I'm never doing that again. I'll be at the dentist's office every month. And to be honest, I knew something wasn't right. Like I knew something was going on with that tooth for a little bit, but I was scared. I was scared. Can't be strong all the time, you know?
We all have our quirks.
Yeah, we all got them. I don't like medical stuff, and you know who I blame? I blame Kate. You know what?
Oh, Kate has absolutely traumatized us.
Traumatized. Guys, I can't with the pregnancy updates. Actually, she's been fine since she's had the baby, since Andy's been here, but when
Uh,
you have a friend that's pregnant, they want to tell you all the things.
oh, wait, we haven't even announced it on the pod. Kate had
Oh,
her baby.
Oh, yeah, Kate had her. Yeah, so I
Okay,
mean,
wait.
it's not
So
really that
we
big of a deal. She had a baby, blah blah blah.
blah blah, blah. She already had one. Who needs
Uh,
two?
yeah.
But
What do you want to know? Another one? You want to know every time she has one? Just
guys,
kidding.
potheads, we were trying to be good in 2026. We were trying to get a week ahead of recording. And so we were going to record Kate's final episode before her maternity leave on like a Saturday morning. Friday night, Kate goes into the hospital to give birth.
Yeah. So we're like, so does this mean that we're not doing the podcast or what?
Yeah, can your husband bring the microphone to the hospital?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Get an epidural. We've got things to do.
So
I
then
hope everyone knows that I'm joking.
we're joking, but then we had to scramble. That's why we had to take a week off.
We had
Sorry.
a yeah, we weren't prepared. We thought we had a good 2 more weeks left before Kate was gonna pop. So, anyways, it was a baby bye week, but we're back and we got some new things coming for you guys that we're super excited about. So, tune in and subscribe and follow, like, share, tweet, comment, all the things so you don't miss it. And we will see you next week for Kylie's episode. I'm sure it's going to be amazing. And we love you guys. Bye.
Bye.